Welcome to AP European History with Dr. Brovkin. Today we are beginning a new topic, which is the industrial beyond recognition. But we started with the ideas of Adam Smith. And I'm going to make a provocative statement and put it like this, question mark. Was Adam Smith a Marxist? Now, in a way, it's an impossible question because Marx lived 50 years after Adam Smith, almost. What we mean when we say Marxist is a person who believes that capitalism works, and the way it works is that labor is the source of all value, and that the relationship of labor are between the capitalist and the worker. So from that point of view, Adam Smith was a Marxist, and then more than that. So this is what I'm going to try to show you, is that even though officially Adam Smith is celebrated as the author of capitalism, I mean, his book, The Wealth of Nations, has been published and republished and can be considered the Bible of capitalism. It's a person who created, in a sense, the ideology of capitalist enterprise. And yet, I will argue that his own writings also confirm that he came to a conclusion that in this relationship between the entrepreneur and the worker, the entrepreneur had a high hand and a better deal, and the workers were downtrodden and exploited. And from that point of view, it is Marxist. But let's go to the very beginning. Adam Smith obviously is a British economist, one of the most famous ones. Probably the only one who is more famous than he is Karl Marx. He was born in 1723 in very poor background, and as a child he was kidnapped by the gypsies and then abandoned, and then he kind of made of his own. He made his own education. He kept reading. He managed to get into Oxford University. And then he was lecturing in Edinburgh. He was from Scotland. He was lucky that in 1764 he got a job with a duke aristocracy on a tour of Europe. So the duke went traveling in Europe. He went with him as a part of his secretary. And that allowed him to come to Paris. And this is where he met all of these constellation of famous people. This is 64. Remember, 1764 is the time when Diderot works on Encyclopédie. So he goes to the to see Helvetius and D'Alembert, and this is where he meets Turgot, a famous economist, by the way, the future finance minister of Louis XVI. So he meets all the famous people of France at that time and does attend the salons where they all met. He, of course, meets Voltaire and just about everybody who is in this milieu of French philosophers. He comes back to Scotland in 1766 and begins to work and putting together his ideas. And finally, it is in 1776 that he publishes a book which is known today under the name The Wealth of Nations. Now, it's a truly revolutionary book in economics. It turns around absolutely all the ideas of economics, but not more than that. It actually explains exactly what the title suggests that it explains. Where does wealth come from? And in a sense, he rearranges the economic policies of England and after that of the whole world. He is really the founder of modern capitalism. And in that sense, he's absolutely without any comparison with anybody else, except with Karl Marx, who explained how capitalism really worked. So let's go to some of his ideas and the context of this work. The context is mercantilism. Mercantilism is the prevailing theory is a prevailing economic theory of the time, and it basically is based on the idea that wealth is gold, and it's a set amount. And what you should do is try to amass as much gold as possible. This is the kind of thinking that guided the Spanish in their quest for American gold through the 1500s and 1600s. Uh, it also meant tariffs, which means protection of your industry from others. It also meant monopolies, and guilds that regulated very tightly the amount of things that are produced. And the accumulation of precious metals is the goal. Now, basically, when he was in Paris, he already heard the conversations of French colleagues, such as Turgot, that what the France needs is laissez-faire. So let us do things, which means get rid of the tolls, get rid of the monopolies, equal taxation. So he was familiar with some of these ideas of laissez-faire, the French ideas, but they were kind of not brought into a system, which he did. Uh, Also, what's important, don't forget, 1776, the year that the book came out, is the year of the American Revolution, which came under the slogan, no taxation without representation. In other words, it's a tax revolt that pretty much triggered this whole revolution, which means that he begins to think in terms of economic theory. What is what how it should work, who pays taxes, and what do you do with the money, how it is invested. All of that came at the same time. Now, basically, what he says in the book, and this is exactly what Karl Marx would agree with, is that wealth is labor. It is people's skill. Wealth comes from goods produced by labor. But it also means land, its improvements, its productive capacity. In other words, what Marx would call the means of production. This is the Marxist expression, but Adam Smith puts it in different terms, but it's the same thing. It is basically the resources, land, improvements, and human labor, meaning skill, capacity to work this land or machines that generates wealth. Now that this is kind of so simple and so obvious, how could people not think about it before? But they didn't. They thought that wealth is actually gold. Gold is not wealth. Gold is a measure of wealth, and there could be any other measure, anything at all. So anyway, uh, he also came up with this idea that the greatest physical wealth comes from the greatest economic liberty. That is elaborating the ideas of Turgot. There should not be any regulations. There should be as free market for labor and for capital as possible. And then finally comes to the most important uh, idea, which is known as the law of supply and demand, which he elaborates in this book. And that, of course, is the basis of his contribution in the Wealth of Nations. So, what is this law about? All of you, I'm sure, are familiar. It is a relationship between three things: supply, demand, and price. Uh, and they're all pretty much connected until they come to equilibrium. So he basically says if you have a marketplace uh, and you have people who come and engage in this marketplace, if you have supply, which is big, and demand, which is low, the price will be low. It would go down because there's too much. There's a huge supply, not enough demand. On the other hand, if you have a high demand and not enough supply, not enough commodities of a certain type, the price is going to go up. and the supply and demand come to an equilibrium, and that equilibrium is the price. So this is so obvious and so incredibly simple, but in a sense, it's much more complex than that, because what it assumes is that people are free to come and sell, and there's no obstacles. In the ideal situation, you do have this kind of a supply and demand equilibrium. In other words, there's no obstacles for the as much supply as possible to come, and as many people who want things demand to come, and then they would be in equilibrium in this ideal scenario. Now, let me read you a quote from his writing that would really explain something. According to the system of natural liberty, the sovereign or the state has only three duties to attend to. First, the duty of protecting the society from the violence or invasion of other independent societies. Secondly, the duty of protecting, as far as possible, every member of the society from the injustice or oppressions of every other member of it, or the duty of establishing an exact administration of justice. And thirdly, the duty of maintaining certain public works and public institutions which it can never be for the interest of any individual or small number of individuals to erect or maintain. Now, and it is an elaboration of the supply and demand law. That's okay, because the supply and demand law assumes freedom of everyone to come to the market. But if you think about it, who has better chances to come to the market, the rich person or a poor person? The rich person. If you have a negotiation over wages to be paid to the worker who comes in and is looking for a job in the market of jobs, he is more desperate, and he is more willing to work for less money because he's desperate than a rich person who can afford himself to pick and choose and pay whatever he has. In other words, there is no actual free market that people compete for jobs or compete for commodities. The powerful ones, the rich ones, always have an advantage in the marketplace. And this is why, in this quote, Adam Smith is saying the duty of the government is to make sure that there are conditions for fair competition for jobs, fair competition for commodities among the people who take part in the market. He also says we must rely on the competition of employers for workers and for competition of employers for workers and among workers for their jobs. So in other words, he basically says that laissez-faire is genuine, true competition of everybody for everything. Then the supply and demand can work. But a lot of times, he actually says, the rich ones enforce a monopoly, and they deliberately create conditions when there is no free competition. Let me put it another quote where he elaborates on this. I quote, he warned against letting merchants and manufacturers determine the policy of the government. And here he says, the interests of the dealers at any particular branch of trade of manufacturers, says Adam Smith, is always in some respects different from and even opposite to that of the public. The proposal of any law or regulation of commerce which comes from this order ought always to be listened to with great precaution. It comes from the order of men who have generally an interest to deceive and even to oppress the public, and who have, upon many occasions, both deceived and oppressed. In other words, here I am arguing one more time. Here Adam Smith speaks like Karl Marx. In other words, Karl Marx put it in these terms, that what we have in England is the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, or dictatorship of the entrepreneurs, to put it in a nicer term. Dictatorship in a sense that they force the government to pass legislation that favors them in the marketplace over the workers. That's the unfairness. In other words, according to Karl Marx and to Adam Smith, there is no free competition. There is no free laissez-faire for all participants in the market. Those ones that have money have power, and through power they actually make laws that favor them over the others. In other words, when you pass a law that says you cannot organize trade unions, which will bargain collectively for wages, for higher wages, that is interference into the marketplace, because the entrepreneurs can organize and do organize into all kinds of associations, which are known today under the name the companies or the corporations or the joint stock companies. What is that? That's a form of organizing their capital and pulling it together to produce more and better. But when the workers try to do it, at that time, this is banned by the parliament. They're not allowed to, which means they have to compete individually, one-on-one. And of course, when they compete one-on-one, they are desperate to get the job and they're ready to work for less, which is, from Adam Smith's point of view, interference into laissez-faire, interference into the free and fair competition for labor. So this is all pretty much the arguments that the way Adam Smith understood capitalist economics is that the way it is interpreted today is skewed, is not the way he meant it. The way it is presented today, he is the apostle of capitalism. He did say that the benefit of one will contribute to the benefit of another. He did say that profit seeking is good because profit seeking will contribute to the well-being of everyone. That is true, but at the same time, it is true that which the apologists of Adam Smith as a great designer of capitalism do not mention, is that he said the way it is set up in England now at his time is totally in favor of one side only, and that is of the side of entrepreneurs. And that is what is going to lead to other economists, such as Karl Marx, to say what is actually wrong with this system that is totally skewed in terms of one side. And it is Karl Marx who is going to say what we have is a dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, and what we need is liberation of workers who have nothing to lose but their chains. And on that moment, I'm going to finish this discussion. Thank you very much. Adam Smith, Vladimir Brovkin, sign up for AP European History. Thank you.